What if the very people sent to save you were actually sent to erase you? For Jason and his family, this horrifying question became their reality on a day that started with nothing more than suburban confusion. It was a day that would end with them fighting not just for their lives, but for their humanity, against the monsters they were told to fear and the monsters they would become. The placid Sunday morning shattered without warning. Through their kitchen window, Jason and Beth watched a surreal panic unfold. Their neighbors, the Millers, were frantically throwing bags into their minivan, with the desperation of people escaping a biblical flood. A silent alarm had rippled through the neighborhood, a contagion of fear that had somehow skipped their house. Confused and unsettled, they stepped outside, only to be swept up in the current. The entire street was a river of humanity flowing in one direction. Jason still had no idea what was happening, but the herd instinct is a powerful drug. Looking at the terrified faces of his wife and daughter, precaution won over logic. He made a snap decision: they would follow, convinced he was driving them towards safety. But the road to safety took a bizarre, impossible turn on the way. They saw something that defied all logic. Headlights were coming toward them. It was their neighbors. The same people who had fled in terror were now returning. The confusion was maddening. Things quickly grew from unsettling to terrifying as the reverse migration clogged the single artery out of town. Before long, Jason's family was trapped in a dead, still traffic jam, a growing dread coiling in his stomach. That is when they saw it. The road ahead was blocked by a formidable military checkpoint. The escape was a lie, the return was an order, and the blockade was a cage. In that chilling moment, Jason understood with absolute clarity. They had been completely and utterly isolated. The sky itself seemed to crack open. A rock-like object, trailing smoke and fury, crashed nearby, throwing up a cloud of earth and dust. Moments later, the source of the projectile made itself known. Two fighter jets thundered past, their engines a deafening scream, heading straight toward the town. Everyone watched in stunned silence as the sky began to weep fire. Bombs rained down on the very homes they had been ordered to return to. It was Beth, Jason's wife, whose mind pieced together the monstrous truth first. If they had obeyed, they'd be ash. Their fate would have been sealed under the guise of safety. The quarantine wasn't to contain a virus. It was to create a kill box. The jets, having delivered their payload, banked sharply, now turning their attention toward the fleeing people on the roads. That is when the final, horrifying piece of the puzzle clicked into place for everyone. The military wasn't trying to save them, they were trying to kill them. Amidst the screaming and chaos, Beth's eyes spotted a potential sanctuary on a nearby hill, a school she urged her family to climb, to run for higher ground. The jets began their second bombing run, a symphony of destruction aimed at the fleeing convoy. But by a stroke of luck, the family managed to scramble clear of the main blast waves. Exhausted and stumbling, their lungs burning with smoke and fear, they reached the school and banged desperately on the reinforced steel door of a bunker. As the booming roar of the planes drew terrifyingly near, the heavy door finally groaned open and then sealed shut behind them, plunging them into darkness and silence. What kind of virus could have forced the army to take such a drastic, inhuman measure? The question hung in the stale air, but for now, they were safe. Inside the bunker, they found expired canned food and a small supply of water, enough to last the three of them for some time. But as Jason secured the entrance, he saw Beth's face, pale under the dim light. Her palm was cut, a fresh wound from closing the heavy door. What if she was already infected? The thought was a venomous whisper, but there was no time to dwell on it. Jason wrapped the door's handles with heavy iron links, a desperate final lock against the world outside. They would hide here, they would wait. But life underground was a slow-motion nightmare. Each day bled into the next, a monotonous cycle of stale canned food and muddy water from an old well. To stave off the crushing boredom and encroaching despair, they played cards and hide and seek in the gloomy, concrete space. Cut off from everything, they felt like the last three people on Earth, living at the end of time itself. Their daughter was the first to voice the question that haunted them all. Jason, his heart aching, had no real answer. All he could offer was a fragile promise. When the virus is gone and life blooms again, only then will we go outside. They never imagined that this wait, this test of endurance, would stretch into 300 agonizing days. The little girl developed a ritual. She would peek at the world through a small reflector mirror they had attached to the ventilation duct. But every time, the reflection showed the same heartbreaking image: a world scorched to ashes, lifeless and bleak. Slowly, a new, terrible thought began to form in her young mind. Maybe they really were the last people alive. Beth would comfort her, whispering that her friends were probably hiding too, in other bunkers, just like them. Then, one day, the delicate balance of their survival was shattered. The girl opened a can of beans, only to find it empty. On the back, a tiny gnawed hole. Something had stolen their food. A frantic check of their remaining stock revealed 12 more cans had been emptied. 2 weeks' worth of supplies, gone. Heartbroken, Beth concluded rats had found their way in through the vent. Seeing his daughter's crestfallen face, Jason tried to be the strong father. "Don't worry," he said, forcing a smile. "If the food runs out, I'll go up there and find more," a promise he prayed he'd never have to keep. That night, the thief returned, a faint noise from the storage corner, a rat brazenly trying to steal another can. Furious, Jason grabbed a knife. This was not just a pest, it was a threat to their survival. But the creature was unnaturally fast, darting toward its escape route. Just as it was about to disappear back into the duct, Beth lunged, her hands closing around the squirming body. But their victory was short, lived in its struggle. The rat knocked over an oil lamp. The temperature in the confined space skyrocketed. Suddenly, the lamp exploded, spewing kerosene and fire. Flames licked up the walls, eating their precious oxygen. Panic erupted. Beth ripped down a curtain to smother the fire, while Jason hauled buckets of murky water, dousing the spreading flames. After a desperate choked struggle, they finally put it out, leaving them in darkness, panting and covered in soot. They found their daughter under the bed, staring at the reflector mirror. A thick column of black smoke was pouring out of their ventilation duct. A smoke signal, advertising their location to anyone or anything that might be watching. They stayed awake all night, paralyzed by terror, listening for the sound of approaching doom, but the night remained silent. The next morning, Jason checked the mirror. It was blackened with soot. The smoke had escaped, but now a thick layer of ash clung to the vent's opening. It might help conceal them, but it was too great a risk. They had to clean it. With trembling hands, they unchained the door and stepped outside for the first time in 300 days, leaving their daughter alone inside. Time stretched on. They didn't return. Anxious, the girl peered through the mirror. She saw her parents camouflaging the bunker door, but then something else. In the distance, a black shadow slithered across the scorched forest floor. Terrified, she screamed for her father to look behind him, but they were too far away to hear. Panic overcame her. She threw the door open and rushed outside, calling for them, but the world was empty. They were gone. Suddenly, two hands grabbed her. It was them. They dragged her back to the bunker, their faces masks of sheer terror. Jason frantically secured the door and pressed his ear to the ground, motioning for absolute silence. Then they heard it, footsteps above, heavy, deliberate, searching. Something knew they were down there. The little girl broke into terrified sobs, and Beth desperately tried to quiet her, whispering that any noise could be their death sentence. Suddenly, a loud crash shook the entire bunker. The footsteps stopped directly above them. The thing they feared had arrived. Something pushed against the iron door from outside, rattling the heavy chains violently. It knew they were inside. Each slam cracked the wooden support beams. The door wouldn't hold. In a burst of desperate courage, Beth scrambled up the ladder, using her own body as a brace. But the pressure was immense. Slowly, a gap opened, and through the crack, two glowing green eyes peered into their sanctuary. At that exact moment, Jason broke off a steel pipe and jammed it into the frame, forcing the door shut with a deafening screech of metal on metal. The pressure above vanished. The footsteps faded. They were safe, for now, but Jason's hands shook uncontrollably. He now knew the outside world wasn't just filled with ruthless soldiers, but with terrifying monsters as well. Their hope crumbled. Their hiding place was exposed. It was only a matter of time, and soon enough, the sound returned. Not one set of footsteps, but dozens, countless, a swarm gathering above them, launching a massive coordinated assault. This time, the iron door buckled and gave way. A sea of glowing green eyes stared down into the darkness. The family stumbled back as the monsters began to pour in. Jason hurled their last oil lamp and shoved a cabinet against the breach. But it was futile. That is when their daughter spotted it, a small duct opening in the floor, an escape route. Jason smashed it open, forcing his wife and child through the narrow passage. But when he tried to follow, he became stuck. The monsters were seconds away. In a moment of pure, agonizing desperation, Jason dislocated his own arm, wriggling through the opening with a pained grunt. Beth pulled with all her might, nearly getting him free, when a massive clawed foot burst through the flames and seized his leg. Beth and her daughter sprinted through the dark tunnels, Jason's screams echoing behind them, the sound of a father buying his family time with his own life. They burst into the open, only to find their path blocked by a massive wall. A helicopter spotlight swept over them, trapping them in its glare. A giant net dropped from above, ensnaring them both. Through the mesh, Beth saw figures with glowing green eyes closing in. But as they drew closer, she realized the horrifying truth. They weren't monsters. They were soldiers in hazmat suits, their eyes glowing through night vision goggles. The soldiers pulled out syringes, jabbing them into their necks. Black blood trickled out. Infected, the commander declared, ordering his men to execute them both. The virus was airborne, invisible, and the army's only solution was extermination. Beth watched in horror as they raised their weapons at her daughter. Rage consumed her, and black veins began crawling across her skin. But before she could act, a spray of blood erupted from a soldier's neck. It was Jason. He had returned. His eyes glowing demonic red, his strength multiplied. He had transformed, but even in his new, monstrous form, he couldn't withstand the hail of bullets for long. He collapsed, his sacrifice buying his family precious seconds. Amid the chaos, Beth and her daughter escaped the net. Beth herself had begun to transform, slaughtering several soldiers before she too was struck down. Her daughter, hidden in the shadows, saw everything. Overwhelmed by fury, the girl transformed, leaping at a soldier with deadly intent. But with her last breath, Beth stopped her, refusing to let her daughter become a monster. The girl calmed, her veins returning to normal. Jason, gravely wounded, looked at his daughter one last time and closed his eyes forever. Just then, another helicopter arrived. Beth grabbed her daughter and ran, finding refuge in a hidden underground passage. A light revealed a small boy, their old neighbor, who led them to a cellar where dozens of survivors were hiding. Countless people forced to live like rats in the dark just to survive the cure. Jason's family had spent every day running from monsters. Yet in truth, in the eyes of the uninfected world, they themselves had become the monsters. And if you paid close attention, you'd realize they always knew. That is why they warned their daughter never to lose her temper, because anger brought out the transformation. And that is where our story ends for today. If you enjoyed it, be sure to follow for more.